The land stretched wide and patient, as if it had been waiting longer than anyone could remember. Golden dust moved with the wind in slow spirals, rising and settling like breath. The sky hung low in the evening, painted in fading amber, and everything felt quiet enough to hear a memory. There was a house at the edge of it all, not broken, not whole either, just standing, like it had learned not to expect too much from time. And beside it, she stood, a woman in her mid-20s, though the years behind her eyes told a story that did not match her age. Her hands were rough from work, her posture steady, her silence deeper than most people's words. She had a way of standing still that made it seem like she belonged more to the land than to the town behind her. The town had a name once. People still used it, but without meaning. It was the kind of place where stories faded faster than footprints, where people watched more than they spoke. And they watched her, not because she asked for attention, but because she never did. They said she had been alone for too long. They said something in her had gone quiet in a way that didn't come back. But they did not know the whole of it. They did not see the nights she sat by the small wooden window, listening to the wind as if it carried voices she once knew. They did not see the way she folded her pain neatly into her days, like a letter she refused to open but could not throw away. She had lost her family before she had learned how to need them properly. And after that, she had learned something harder than survival. She had learned how to continue. Each morning, she moved through her life with a quiet rhythm, fetching water, fixing what could be fixed, letting go of what could not. No complaints, no asking, just a steady kind of being that most people mistook for emptiness. But she was not empty. She was full of things she had never been given the chance to say. There was a man in the town, the kind people noticed easily, not because he was remarkable, but because he made sure he was seen. He carried himself like the world owed him something better, like the dust on his boots was temporary, like the town was only a stop on his way to something grander. He spoke often of leaving, of bigger places, brighter streets, easier lives, and sometimes he spoke to her, not deeply, not carefully, just enough. He would sit beside her in the evenings, when the sun softened and the world felt less harsh. His words came easy, scattered like loose change. Stories of what could be, plans that never quite formed into something real. She listened, not because his words were special, but because she had learned to find meaning in small things. He did not see her the way she was. He saw someone quiet, someone who would not ask for more than he could give. And in that he felt comfortable. There was a night when the sky burned deeper than usual, orange melting into purple. The horizon stretched thin like a fading memory. They sat outside, side by side, the space between them filled with something unspoken. He talked about leaving again, said this place had nothing for him, said there was more waiting beyond the hills, beyond the dust, beyond the silence. She listened, her gaze fixed somewhere far ahead, not on the road, but on something deeper than it. She did not ask him to stay. She did not ask him to take her with him. Her voice, when it came, was soft enough to be carried by the wind. Just don't forget this place. And maybe don't forget me either. The words did not weigh much, but even that felt like too much for him. He laughed lightly, not unkindly, just carelessly, said something about how people don't forget things that don't matter. And in that moment she understood, not with pain, not with shock, just a quiet understanding that settled into her bones. He was never someone who stayed, and she had been hoping in a way she never admitted. A few days later, he was gone. No goodbye, no explanation, just absence. The town noticed the way it always did, not loudly, not with concern, just a shift in the way people looked at her, as if they had expected this, as if she should have too. She continued her days the same way, fetching water, fixing what could be fixed, letting go of what could not. But something had changed, not broken, just settled, the kind of settling that comes when something uncertain finally becomes clear. The old shopkeeper watched her more closely now. He had eyes that seemed to remember things others had forgotten. One afternoon, as she passed by, he spoke in his usual slow, unfinished way. Some people, he said, pausing as if choosing which words deserved to exist, are not meant to stay in places that ask nothing of them. She did not respond, but she carried the words with her. There was a child, too, always sitting near the edge of the street, watching the world like it was a story she was still trying to understand. The child looked at her differently, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with recognition, as if she saw something in her that the others did not. And there was a widow who lived quietly near the far end of the town. A woman who had once known love deeply and now carried it gently, like something fragile but not broken. She would nod when they crossed paths, a silent acknowledgement, a kind of understanding that needed no words. The days passed. The wind kept moving. And one evening, as the sun lowered itself slowly into the horizon, she stood again at the edge of her small home. The same place, the same sky, but something inside her felt different. Not empty, not waiting, just still. The kind of stillness that does not come from giving up, but from letting go. The wind moved around her, lifting the dust in soft, familiar spirals. And for the first time in a long while, it did not feel like it was taking something from her. It felt like it was leaving her exactly where she was meant to be. Morning arrived gently, like it did not wish to disturb anything that had finally learned to rest. Light slipped through the cracks of her small wooden home, laying itself softly across the floor. Dust shimmered in the air, drifting without urgency. The world outside had not changed, but something within her had shifted into a quieter place. She moved through her morning slowly, not with heaviness, not with reluctance, just with a kind of awareness she had not known before. Every small action felt more present, every sound clearer. The wind outside no longer felt like something that carried things away. It felt like something that passed through and left her untouched. The town woke the way it always did, unhurried, familiar, slightly distant. She walked its narrow paths with steady steps, her gaze lowered but not withdrawn. People still watched her, but less now. Or maybe she simply noticed it less. It was near the well where she first saw him. Not in the way one notices something important. Just there, a man in his early 30s, standing with quiet ease as he adjusted the worn rope of a water bucket. His movements were careful, unspoken, as if he had learned long ago that rushing only breaks things that cannot be repaired. He did not look at her immediately, and somehow, that was the first thing she noticed. Most people in the town looked too quickly, measured too quickly, but he didn't. When the bucket slipped slightly from her grip, the rope burning faintly against her palm, he stepped forward without urgency. Not rushing, not making a moment of it, just helping. His hands were steady, firm, but not forceful. He secured the rope, lifted the weight, and set it right again as if it had never faltered. No questions, no remarks about carelessness or strength. Just a quiet correction, and then he stepped back. She expected something, a word, a glance, a reason for the moment to exist. But he only nodded slightly and returned his own task. And that was all. She carried the water home, as she always did. But something lingered, not in the moment itself, but in its absence, the lack of weight, the lack of expectation. Days passed. He appeared again and again in the quiet corners of the town where life unfolded without notice. Fixing a broken fence, helping the old shopkeeper with supplies, standing still when others spoke too much. He was not someone people talked about. He gave them no reason to. And yet, he was always there, like a part of the town that had always existed but had only now been seen. Their paths crossed in small, unremarkable ways. A shared glance that lasted no longer than necessary. A nod in passing. A moment where their footsteps aligned before parting again. Nothing that would be remembered by anyone else. But she remembered. Not because they were meaningful in the way stories usually are, but because they were easy. There was no effort in them. No weight to carry afterward. Just moments that arrived and left without taking anything with them. One afternoon, the wind picked up stronger than usual. Not harsh, just insistent. She was working outside her home, trying to secure a loose piece of wood that had begun to shift with time. Her hands moved carefully, but the structure resisted her efforts. It was not heavy, but it required more than one set of hands. She paused, stepping back, her breath steady but her thoughts quiet. Before she could decide what to do next, he was there. Not suddenly, not dramatically, just present. He looked at the wood, then at her, his expression unchanged. No question of whether she needed help. No assumption that she couldn't manage. Just a simple, quiet offer that didn't even need to be spoken. They worked together without conversation. He held the frame steady while she adjusted it. She secured it while he made sure it aligned. Their movements found a rhythm without instruction. And for a brief moment, it felt like something natural. Not borrowed, not temporary, just right. When it was done, he stepped back again, the same way he always did, leaving the moment whole, but not extended. She looked at him then, not searching, not questioning, just noticing. There was something in the way he stood, a kind of stillness that did not come from emptiness, but from knowing where to place oneself in the world. She realized then, he did not try to take up space. He simply existed within it, and somehow, that made everything around him feel less crowded. That evening, as the sky softened into pale gold, she found herself sitting outside again, the same place she had once shared with someone else. But the feeling was different now, less expectant, more grounded. Footsteps approached, quiet against the earth. She did not turn immediately. She already knew. He sat down a short distance away, not close enough to intrude, not far enough to disappear. The space between them felt intentional. They watched the sky together. No words, no need to fill the silence. And yet it did not feel empty. It felt shared. After a while, he spoke. Not loudly, not to start something, just a simple observation about the weather, about how the wind had changed its direction lately. His voice was calm, even, unaffected by the need to be heard. She responded softly. And then, silence again. But it was not the kind of silence she had known before. It did not press against her. It did not remind her of what was missing. It simply existed, gently, like something that did not need explanation. Days turned into a quiet pattern. Not routine, but something close to it. He would appear where he was needed and leave before being asked to stay. He never lingered for attention, never offered more than what was given. And yet, his presence remained. The old shopkeeper began to speak a little more when she visited. Not directly about him, but around him. Some people, he said once, while adjusting something on his worn counter, do not come into your life to change it loudly. They come so quietly, you almost miss the moment everything becomes easier. She carried those words with her. The child still watched her, but now sometimes the child looked past her, toward him, as if she understood something neither of them had spoken yet. Even the widow seemed to notice. One evening, as they crossed paths, the older woman paused briefly. Some things, she said gently, are not meant to arrive all at once. They grow like something that knows it will stay. The words settled into her in a way she did not try to understand. Not yet, because something inside her had begun to shift again, not with force, not with fear, but with a quiet, unfamiliar warmth. It was not hope, not the kind she had once held on to. It was something steadier, something that did not ask what would happen next, only what already was. And one evening, as they walked side by side along the edge of the town, their steps unhurried, their silence unbroken, she realized something. She was no longer listening for footsteps that had left. She was no longer watching the road for someone who had chosen it over her. She was simply walking, and beside her, he was still there, not asking to be noticed, not asking to be understood, just staying. And for the first time in a long while, her silence did not feel like something she carried alone. The rain came without warning. In a land that had long forgotten softness, it arrived like a quiet miracle. Not heavy, not wild, just steady enough to be felt. Each drop touched the dust gently, as if asking permission to stay. The town slowed beneath it. Wooden roofs whispered with the sound. The earth darkened in places where it had always been pale. And for a moment, everything seemed to breathe differently. She stood outside her home, letting the rain fall against her skin. Not seeking shelter, not turning away, just standing there. The water traced its way down her hands, washing over the marks of work, over the faint lines that time had left behind. It felt unfamiliar, but not unwelcome, like something she had once known and forgotten. He appeared as he always did, not suddenly, not announced, just there, standing a few steps away, watching the rain with the same quiet attention he gave to everything else. He did not ask why she was standing in it. He did not tell her to come inside. He simply stood beside her and allowed the moment to exist as it was. For a while, neither of them spoke. The rain filled the space between them, soft and constant. And in that quiet, something within her began to loosen. Not break, not fall apart, just soften. They moved inside eventually, not because they needed to, but because the moment had already given what it came to give. The room felt smaller with the sound of rain outside. Warmer. He sat near the window, his posture relaxed, his presence steady. She moved slowly, placing a kettle near the fire, her movements familiar but lighter now. There was no plan to speak, no expectation, and yet the silence that followed felt different. Not empty, not waiting, but open. She found herself sitting across from him, her hands resting loosely in her lap. Her thoughts did not rush. They did not demand to be heard. They simply arrived, and after a long while, her voice followed. She spoke of the man who had left, not with bitterness, not with sorrow that needed comfort, just truth, simple, clear, unfolded like a memory that had finally found its place. She spoke of quiet hopes she never named, of moments that meant more to her than they ever did to him, of the way absence can feel heavier than presence when it arrives without warning. He listened, not with pity, not with interruption, just listening, as if her words were not something to be solved, but something to be held. And when she finished, he did not offer answers. He did not tell her she deserved better. He did not try to fill the space with meaning. He simply nodded, once gently, and in that moment, something shifted. She realized this is what it feels like, to be seen, not examined, not judged, not fixed, just understood. The rain continued outside, softer now, like it had done what it came to do. Days after that felt different, not dramatically, not in ways others would notice, but in small, quiet shifts that only she could feel. She smiled more, though not often, but when she did, it stayed longer. The heaviness she once carried so carefully had begun to lighten, not disappear, but loosen, as if it no longer needed to define her. They spent more time together, not intentionally, just naturally, walking through the edges of the town, sharing space without needing to fill it, sitting in silence that now felt warm instead of distant. He began to speak a little more, not all at once, just pieces, fragments of a life he had lived quietly. He spoke of loss, though not in detail, of choosing to stay when leaving would have been easier, of learning that some things grow stronger when you stop trying to escape them. She listened the way he had listened to her, without rushing, without trying to reach the end of the story. And somewhere in those shared silences, something began to grow. Not quickly, not loudly, but steadily. It was not the kind of feeling she had known before. Not fragile, not uncertain. It did not make her question herself. It made her feel safe. One evening, they sat together as the sky softened into a quiet shade of blue. The air was still, the kind of stillness that comes before something changes, even if you cannot yet see how. She laughed. It came unexpectedly, soft at first, then fuller. The kind of laugh that carries no weight. For a moment, she seemed surprised by it, as if it had come from somewhere she had forgotten existed. He did not react loudly. He did not ask what was funny. He simply watched her with a quiet warmth that said more than words ever could, and that stayed with her longer than the laughter itself. But with warmth came something else, a quiet fear. It had not arrived suddenly. It grew slowly, like a shadow stretching at the edge of light. What if this, too, was temporary? What if staying was only another form of leaving? What if she allowed herself to trust something only to watch it disappear again? The thoughts did not consume her, but they lingered. And so, she stepped back. Not completely, not in a way that would be noticed by anyone else, but just enough. Her words became fewer, her presence slightly more distant. Not cold, just careful. He noticed. Of course he did, but he did not ask why. He did not reach for her. He did not try to pull her back. He simply remained the same. Steady, unchanged, present. Days passed like that, a quiet distance forming and then holding. And in that space, she waited, not for him to chase her, but for something to reveal itself. And what she found surprised her. He stayed, without question, without demand, without making her feel like she was losing something by stepping away. And in that, something inside her began to settle again. This was not like before. This was not someone who needed her to stay or feared that she would leave. This was someone who understood that staying means nothing if it is not chosen freely. One evening, as the sky dipped into gold once more, she found herself walking toward him, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. There were no words exchanged when she reached his side. No explanation for the distance that had been. None was needed. Some things do not require language. They sat together again. The same place. The same quiet. But everything felt different, because now she understood something she had not known before. Love is not the loud promise of forever. It is not the fear of losing something fragile. It is quiet. It is steady. It is someone who remains, even when you expect them to leave. And as the wind moved gently around them, no longer restless, no longer searching, she realized something else. She was no longer waiting. She was no longer hoping for something uncertain to return. She was choosing to stay, choosing to trust, choosing to feel without fear of what might come after. And beside her, he was still there, not asking for anything more, not needing to be anything else, just staying. And this time, so was she. The evening returned the way it always had. Soft, golden, unhurried. The sky stretched wide above the quiet town, painted in colors that never stayed long enough to be held. The wind moved gently through the open spaces, no longer restless, no longer searching. And she stood there again, at the edge of her home, at the edge of everything she had once thought she had lost. But this time, she was not the same. There was a steadiness in her now, not the kind built from endurance, but the kind that comes from understanding, the kind that no longer asks why something ended, only what it made room for. Days had passed in quiet harmony. Nothing loud had happened. Nothing dramatic had changed. And yet, everything felt different. The town seemed softer somehow. Or maybe she had stopped seeing it through the weight she once carried. The old shopkeeper still watched from his doorway, his silence now feeling less distant, more knowing. The child no longer just observed her. Sometimes she smiled, small and certain, as if she had always known how this story would unfold. And the widow, she had begun to greet her with a warmth that felt like quiet approval, the kind given not for survival, but for growth. And he was still there, not closer than before, not further away, just present, the same way he had always been. That evening, they sat together again beneath the fading light. No words passed between them. None were needed. There was something complete in the silence now, something that did not reach for more. And then, the sound of footsteps, familiar in a way that did not bring comfort. She felt it before she turned. The past does not always knock loudly. Sometimes it simply returns. He stood there. The man who had once spoken of leaving like it was a promise the world owed him. The man who had walked away without carrying anything with him, not even the weight of what he left behind. He looked the same, perhaps a little more worn, a little less certain, but not changed in the ways that mattered. The town noticed. Of course it did. It always noticed when something unfinished came back to life. He stepped closer, his eyes settling on her with something unfamiliar. Not confidence, not ease, something quieter. Regret, perhaps. He spoke her name, softly, as if testing whether it still belonged to him. She did not move. Not away. Not toward him. Just still. He spoke of where he had gone, of the places that had not been what he expected, of how the world beyond the dust had not held what he thought it would. His words were slower now, less certain, as if he had finally learned that leaving does not always lead to something better. Sometimes it simply leads back to what was already enough. He looked at her then, truly looked, and for the first time, it seemed like he saw her, not as someone quiet, not as someone easy to leave, but as someone who had remained when he had not. There was a pause, the kind that asked for something, not loudly, but clearly. a second chance, or perhaps forgiveness. The town held its breath in the way it always did, waiting to see if the story would repeat itself. But she was no longer standing in the same place she had once been. She stepped forward just once, not to close the distance, but to meet the moment. Her voice, when it came, was calm, steady, not shaped by anger, not softened by longing, just true. She listened to him, to all of it, without interruption, without resistance. And when he finished, she did something neither he nor the town expected. She let the silence settle, not as rejection, not as hesitation, but as something complete. Then she nodded gently, not an agreement, not an invitation, just acknowledgement of what had been and what was no longer. There were no heavy words, no need to explain what he had lost or what she had found. Some things do not need to be spoken to be understood. She turned away, not quickly, not with finality, but with a quiet certainty that needed no confirmation. And in that moment, the past lost its place in her story. The wind moved again, brushing softly against the land. But this time, it carried nothing away. It simply passed through, leaving everything exactly where it belonged. She walked back toward where he sat, the man who had never left, the man who had never asked her to stay, yet had always been there when she chose to. He looked at her as she approached, not with questions, not with expectation, just with the same quiet presence he had always offered. She sat beside him, closer this time, not by accident, not by habit, but by choice. For a while, neither of them spoke. The sky deepened above them, the last of the light slipping gently into night. And then, in a voice softer than the wind itself, she spoke, not a confession, not a declaration, just a truth. I understand now. He did not ask what she meant. He did not need to, because some truths do not belong to words. They belong to the way someone stays, the way someone sees you without needing you to become anything else, the way someone waits without making you feel like you're being held. And in that quiet space between them, something settled, not beginning, not ending, just becoming. The town moved on, as it always did. Days came and went. The wind continued its slow dance across the land. But for her, something had finally come to rest. Not because life had become perfect, not because the past had disappeared, but because she had found something steady enough to stand beside. Something that did not ask her to be less or more than she already was. And maybe that is how it happens. Not all at once, not in ways that the world celebrates, but quietly, gently, in the spaces where you least expect it. Love does not always arrive like a storm. Sometimes it comes like rain, soft enough to be missed, steady enough to stay. And if you have ever felt like you were waiting for something that never came, if you have ever held onto something that could not hold you back, maybe this story is for you. Maybe it is a reminder that not everything meant for you will chase you. Some things will simply remain until you are ready to see them. If this story stayed with you, take a moment to like, comment, and subscribe. And tell me, where are you watching from? Because every place in the world holds a story, and maybe yours is still unfolding.